Hello YouTubers!
And welcome to this review of the EnviroKlenz Air Purifier.
My prime testing for this, and to see that it actually works well, is to see whether it can actually keep the air clean in the entire volume of my studio. Now, this air purifier is not going to win any awards for beauty or its form. In fact, it looks very industrial and some may even say ugly, but in this case I would choose function over form, and you'll see why. There's no big secret as to why this seems to work far better than the competition. Once you see inside it, you'll see it's just very basic, proper industrial design. So let's go take a look at it.
So this air purifier is basically a tin box with some nice enamel painting, and I will highlight it's made in the USA, and I say that because it seems to be fairly well made. You've got these grills which are on the bottom. These exhaust the air, while the grills are at the top on both sides. These are the air intake. It is on casters, so it can be rolled around easily. On the back we've got the control panel, which is your dial which controls whether it's switched off. It's switched to the whisper or whisper setting, low, medium or high. They've made it easy to access. They've got a little slide so that you can move access and get to the air filters easily. This first filter is specifically designed by EnviroKlenz. They're filtered to remove VOCs. Now for me, perhaps the VOC side of this isn't as important, but still in my confined space in this cabin, things like either cooking smells or anything inside is fairly confined because I've got quite a tight small space. So having something that does remove VOCs is certainly a benefit. But the main filter that I'm interested in is this HEPA filter. Now hopefully you'll realize why there's no actual magic as to why this air purifier works that well. For one, it has a huge surface area of material to do the HEPA filtration. So as you can see, a really big thick unit in comparison to other units. It has this rubber seal across the bottom so that when it does sit in there, it seals nicely. And if we take a closer look inside, you'll see it has a rather nice large industrial motor acting as the fan. Now the claims are that this can pull about 250 CFM or cubic feet per minute on its highest setting, and on its lower settings around 84. So what does that mean for my cabin? My cabin is about 4,300 cubic feet. And if you do the mathematics, that means it would take anywhere from 1 to 3 hours to circulate all the air. Now for some important information that you need to be aware of. So for one, this unit without the UV lights costs about $650. But if you want to ensure the performance of this unit, then you will need to change these filters periodically. So what does that mean? This HEPA filter, they suggest, should be replaced every 2 to 3 years. The VOC filter, they recommend, should be changed every 4 to 5 months. So next, how much noise does this unit make on its various settings? So let me go and switch it on whisper. So that is on whisper, and I doubt that you can even hear that over the background, other background noises inside my cabin. I would certainly consider that normal background white or pink noise. It doesn't bother me at all. But let's go to the next level. Now this is the low setting, and this is perhaps the background noise level I'd have if my refrigerator was running. That's the medium level setting, which is certainly getting noisier. And that's the high setting, which is a little bit noisier.
So in terms of its actual volume, that's very much going to be dictated by the type of room you're in. If you're in a normal lounge with carpeting and curtains or drapes or other treatments, that may absorb a lot of the noise. But for me personally here in my cabin, the whisper or the whisper mode is the one that works for me. So the question to answer is, does it actually perform its job when it's only pushing a very low rate of CFM? And that will answer now during the testing and looking at my monitoring results.
So just before we start the testing, I'm going to show you what the readings are on this air quality monitor. Now this monitor monitors both 2.5 micron and 0.5 micron particles. So these are instantaneous readings, and it has a log of up to 30 days. And that's what I'm going to show you in a moment. Now this morning when I came in, the readings were as low as 8 and 11. Just my presence in the lab moving around obviously unsettles dust, brings dust in, and therefore these readings go up. However, these are still good readings. Anything below 75 is excellent. But we'll come back to these when we talk about the performance on the lower setting.
Right, so let me explain the test setup. And first off, I'm going to say this is what I'd call the showy test. I've got the EnviroKlenz inside a kind of sealed tent, and I've got a smoke machine on top of it. Now the smoke machine, for one, will create some particles which it needs to clear, but those by themselves over time would dissipate. But in the second test, I'm going to show you how long it would take. In fact, we're going to get to 10-20 minutes and this will still be full of smog. So we're going to see how long it takes to clear this tent of the smoke once I give, let's say, a 10 to 15 second burst. So there we go, we've got a total smoke haze in there. So now I'll start the EnviroKlenz. So there we go, in just about 3.5 minutes, it's managed to clear that entire space of those particles and clear up the air that's in there. So during that testing, that reading shot up to well over 1,000. It's only just starting to come down now. But anyway, I'll just show you how long that fog or smoke takes to dissipate if nothing is happening in that enclosure. So here we go, at approaching 20 minutes, we're coming up for 19 minutes. I'm going to move on now. That enclosed space with the smoke machine, which is now switched off, still remains very hazy. So let's go and take a look at the real world tests.
And day 19 and before that is the baseline in my lab prior to having the EnviroKlenz actually switched on and working. So I was sitting up the 700s, even up to 850 prior to switching on that unit. This is after I had just received the unit, I'd switched it on and it brought it down to those levels. And as you can see, over the last day it's averaged 63 and 5. This would have been over the weekend. And then you're going to see it spike when I was doing some work in the lab which made the particles spike up. These spikes were actually where I turned the unit off and then I switched it back on to see if it would bring the levels back down. I'll discuss how I did that.
Right, so how did I get those readings in? Because as you'll have heard, for me, having it set above the whisper or whisper mode would potentially be a distraction in my lab because I've got a lot of concrete floors and that sound travels. So what I did as a test, initially to get the air clean, I switched it up high and I used to then leave it on the low setting and that would maintain the levels at a nice low level. I also found that low level distracting, so I switched it down to the whisper mode and that maintained the levels. So I wanted to make sure that the lab suddenly wasn't just clean and there wasn't any new dust coming in and that it was actually working. So I then switched it off. I left it off for the day and I watched the levels spike. I then switched it back onto the whisper mode, but the whisper mode didn't quite bring it down to the levels in a reasonable amount of time. So what I did was I left it on high overnight, so anywhere between 6 to 12 hours. It totally cleans out my space of about 4,300 cubic feet. Clears it out, and once I've done that, I can then leave it on the whisper mode and it maintains that level, no problem at all. So I must say, I'm really chuffed with the performance. I've certainly been impressed. I'm very chuffed that I've got it in my lab and it's certainly going to be a keeper here for me.